Yeah, so today we are going to talk about something that will be in context of developers as well as designers, and normal people will be able to relate with it, like how they see things in their day-to-day life. So the topic is understanding principles of design in visual design. Now, visual design captures UI design as well as graphic design, like branding and identity design also. So I will be taking examples from all the fields, like UI design as well as graphic design. Now, what are the principles of design? So basically, principles of designs are a set of rules that designers follow in their day-to-day life to come up with a visual composition that is pleasing to look at, as well as principles of design also capture the usability aspect. So if there is a UI being made, so it has to be made sure that it looks aesthetically pleasing, as well as it efficiently conveys the message that it is made for. So the principle of design makes sure like these things are done efficiently. Now, a lot of us might be aware or might be unknowingly using these principles in our life, but we are not aware about the concept. So once we know about the concept, like what design principles are, so knowingly if we implement something, so it will make more sense. Now, why do we need to understand them? So when looking at a visual, what happens is we are in a second, in 2 seconds, we are easily able to tell that is that visual appealing or not. Maybe there is some imbalance in the visual. So why and how this happens, that I will also talk about. So what happens in principal design is like there are certain visual design elements are like line, shape, color, grid, white space. So these are the design elements that designers work with to come up with a thoughtful layout. So how these elements can be arranged in a way so that the visual composition can be made usable as well as pleasing to the eye. Now, what are the five principles that we are going to discuss? They are: first one is scale, the second one is visual hierarchy, third one is balance, the fourth one is contrast, then Gestalt principle is also there. So these are the five principles that we are going to talk about, and we'll also take some examples to understand how these principles work. Now, the first principle is scale. So the principle of scale refers to using relative size to signal importance in a UI or in a composition. So the base of this rule is if something is bigger, so you'll the naturally what happens is we'll notice it first. So now this is the base of scale principles. Now when we go to the example, now what happens is this example where this is a picture of parking lot. Now what this picture is conveying is that there is H, then there is exit sign, then there is staircase sign, then there is lift. Now the reason why the size of H is big, because sometimes if we are in a big parking lot basement or somewhere where the parking is very big, so we do get confused where we have parked our bike or where we have arrived. So this H represents that you are in zone H. So that like this is the most critical information currently that a user needs. So now scale principle is making sure that whatever is the most critical information in a certain scenario, that is conveyed to the user most efficiently. So that is why the size of the H is way big than all exit sign, the staircase sign, or the lift sign. Now the second example, if we come to, so it is a UI based example. Now this is a medium page, regular medium page. Now here what is happening is, if we see this card where Netflix, like everyone wrong about streaming was. So now what is happening is this card is way big. Now the reason medium has made this card big is because they want everyone to see what are the popular articles on medium, rather than seeing what are the normal articles. Like these are also articles listed, but they wanted the attention of the people or of their audience to be on the most popular articles. So they have used this scale principles here, like by displaying this article in a big card, UI card. So next principle is visual hierarchy. So visual hierarchy refers to guiding the eye on the page so that it attends to different design element in the order of their importance. Now what happens is in visual hierarchy also uses the scale principle, the contrast principle, and other principles to set the hierarchy on a page or on a visual composition. Now, if we take the first example, this is a regular Uber app screen, home screen that we come up when we open the Uber application. So here, the first part of the screen is divided into the map. Now, the screen is majorly divided into two parts. The first, second part is the UI where all the other information is there, and the first part is there where the map is shown. Now, once the user opens the application, so the user will first check out where the user is currently. Now, this is the major attention initially, the first attention that the user will pay to this map. Then what happens is then the user will move on, and user will next see where to. So now the hierarchy is set, like you see on the map, then you see on where to, then recent addresses where you visited. So this is the hierarchy that visual hierarchy principle is setting. So this is done intentionally so that the eyes of the user moves in this sequence. Now, if we take the example of this poster, so this is a poster by a furniture designer telling about the furniture and its design. So if we see here, what is happening is the first thing that we notice is the design code or the name of the furniture is the first thing that we will notice when we look at this poster, because the size of the typography is way too big. Then the second thing we will notice is the furniture picture or the photograph. Then the third thing we will notice is the brand, and the last thing we'll notice is the details, like what is the price. So this is intentionally done so that the eye of the viewer or the audience floats in a certain sequence. So that is what visual hierarchy principle tells us. Now, the third principle is balance. The principle of balance refers to satisfying arrangement or proportion of design element on a layout or a composition. So balance is something that what happens is, like when we are looking at a visual composition, so we are able to recognize if that visual composition is out of balance or out of scale. So here what is happening is, like in this balance principles, an imaginary axis is drawn. So what will happen is, like, and there are three type of balance that we can use in our day-to-day life. So in the first one is symmetrical balance. In symmetrical balance, what happens is we will draw a imaginary axis vertically through our layout or through the UI or through the composition. And once we draw that imaginary vertical axis, and we check that on the right side of the axis as well as the left side of the axis, everything is balanced or not. So here, if we draw our axis in the vertical imaginary axis in the center, vertical axis, so we see like everything is symmetrically balanced, everything is mirroring each other, and this text like find a job you love and this CTA is also balancing each other, because like this text is black, and we can also say, so what happens is in balance you can also take help of contrast, you can also take help of scale principle. So here everything is balanced once we draw our imaginary axis from the center of this layout. Now asymmetrical balance, this is example. So what happens is, like let's say this in asymmetrical we can draw a horizontal axis in the visual composition and see if everything whatever is on the left or top or bottom, everything is balancing or not. So let's say we draw a horizontal axis on this composition. Now what will happen is we'll have two different things that we'll notice first. Like here we have a Nike here city, and here we have some detail about the product. But the thing is, the size of this font and the size of this font is way bigger than this thing. So eventually it balances out everything. The visual balance is there if we draw a horizontal axis. Now the third one is radial balance. So in radial balance, we can draw imaginary axis on whatever angle we want. So everything will be balanced on both the portions, on the opposite portions. So this is the example of radial balance. Then the next principle we have is contrast. So basically the principle of contrast refers to the justification of visually dissimilar elements in order to convey the fact that these elements are different. So what happens is, if normally we talk about contrast, so we only think about them in the on the basis of colors, like black and white are contrast, yellow and blue are contrast. But the thing is, contrast can also be conveyed in the form of size, in the form of white space, in the form of other mediums also. So here we have two examples. The first one is from graphic design. So this is like a company, McWill. Basically, they teach English, for example. So here what is happening is the contrast this example captures the contrast in the sense of graphic design. Like if we see everything on the background as well as the foreground is easily accessible, is easily readable. Like if we see McQuill is easily readable, the logo is easily readable, and their thumb line, punch line, whatever it is easily readable. Now if we see this graphic deliverable, so we will also be able to picture everything very crisply, like McQuill and their logo and this girl that's standing in the front, in the foreground, everything is visible. So similarly in this deliverable also, everything whatever is there, visual element is there, we are easily able to differentiate and see it. So this is the contrast that in the sense of graphic design. Now if we come to this UI, so here contrast also refer, like in terms of UI, what is happening here is this delete everything on the screen is kind of similar. Like we do have green on the screen, we do have black radio buttons, everything is there, but once we slide left, so we are able to see a element that is very different from whatever element is present on the screen. So this is also conveying contrast. So and in this way, like it is creating anomaly, like this element is noticeable, this will be noticeable to the user now, and the user can utilize it in whatever sense this is meant to be. So this is the example of contrast in the sense of UI design. Now, the last principle that we are going to talk about is Gestalt Principles. So, Gestalt Principles is also a set of principles. Now, what are Gestalt Principles? So, in our daily life, we see clouds or we see different things that are random, but our mind tries to make sense of it by connecting dots based on the past experiences or old visual experiences we have had. For example, this is a cloud, so we are able to picture it as a heart, and this is also a cloud, and we are able to picture it as a horse. So why our mind is doing this, and how our mind like works in this way to connect the dot and come up with a response. Like our mind is like always trying to connect dots with whatever experience we are having, with whatever visual we are seeing. So our mind is trying to make sense of it. So this is what Gestalt is going to tell, like how our mind works in the sense of visual compositions. Now we are going to discuss 5 principles in Gestalt. So the first one is proximity, the second one is common region, the third one is similarity, the fourth one is continuity and closure. I hope I am audible.
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, so the first one is proximity. Now what law of proximity tells us, elements arranged close to each other are perceived as more related than placed further apart. Now one major thing that plays a role in proximity is white space. Now now I'll also explain what white space is. Now here if we see, we have this section on the top, it might be testimonials or it is some UI section on this website. So these three cards are together. So this is conveying us a sense that these three cards are related or are grouped. And now let's say that this the next section is starting, and there is some space between these two sections. So that space is creating the difference, like these two sections are dissimilar, and like their purpose is dissimilar. So this is what white space is. So having white space basically creates a differentiation, like two elements or two UI elements or two graphic elements are not similar in their behavior or in their function. So this is what white space is. So law of proximity basically tells us, like whatever elements are together, closely placed together, so they seem to be related with each other. So we can use this principle. We do use this principle in our UI design as well as in graphic design to convey what elements are similar. If we place them together, so they have a sense of groupness in them. Now the second one is law of common region. So common region is kind of similar, but common region goes more in deep in the UI. So what happens in common region is, similarly to proximity principle, elements placed within same region are perceived as grouped. Now let's take the example of this particular section where my cursor is. Now here what is happening is, so we can say like these elements are together, right? There might be a picture, there might be some heading, and there might be some body text. So when these elements are placed together and they are very close to each other, so we see them as a grouped element. even if it has a boundary, if even it is a UI card or even it is not, we are able to see that element as one. So this is what a common region tells us. Like when some elements are grouped together, so they seem to be behaving in a certain way, or they seem to be together, they form a one individual element. So this is what a common region talks about. Then law of similarity. So elements sharing similar visual characteristics are perceived to be more related than not sharing similar characteristics. So the very basic example I would say is, on every website on we have header, or on every app we have navigation bar, right? So what happens is, so all the navigation bar or all the website, the header section, so we have all the CTAs placed together. So we are able to understand like these CTAs have a very similar function, maybe to go on a page or maybe to execute an action. So that is what a law of similarity states. Like when elements are visually similar, so the user is easily able to understand like they have a specific function, and it is same in all of these, all of the CTA, for example, all of the buttons. So this is what, or we can take other example, like if we are on a website or on an app, so headings we define as a certain font, maybe a 28 heading font size will be there. So if we are using 28 on every screen, so the user will be if user arrives on a new screen, so user will easily be able to understand like this is the heading, and below this everything is the content. So once the user understands the similarity between visual elements, so user the cognitive load of the user decreases, and the user is easily able to understand whatever information is displayed to him. Now, law of continuity. So, elements arranged in a line or a soft curve are perceived to be more related than those arranged randomly. So, the best example of this would be a drop down. Let's say on any app or any website we are on. So, if we have a drop down, so we see that when the drop down opens, now we know how we have to look at that UI. So, we'll read all the content in that drop down list first. So this is the simple example. Or let's say if we take the example of this second wireframe screen. Now here what is happening is we have a list on the side. So we are easily able, so if we are looking at this list, so we will scan the list first, like 1 2 3 4, like we'll scan the list first, then we'll move on to some other information on the screen. Or maybe in this hero section of the website we have some images as a carousel, if we can say. So we will look at all the images. So this is creating a continuity to go horizontal or vertical. So this is what a law of continuity talks about. Then law of closure. So law of closure is very similar to the example that I took in the cloud example in the initial. So what happens is, even if there is missing foreground, or missing some element is missing in a visual composition, our mind tries to connect the dot, and if through our past experience we are able to understand what this element is. So let's see this USA network logo. So S is missing there, but still we are able to understand that this is an S. Or in NBC logo we are able to, like there are petals only, but there's a small triangle between, so we are able to understand like that is a peacock, a
Hi,
metaphorical.
Zed. Sorry to interrupt. Actually, we have a animation saying if you could go a little slower because he has a lot of information. So if you could just go a little slower.
Okay, someone wants me to go slow. Okay.
Yeah, a little bit if it's possible from your end.
Okay, so should I go back on this example? I'll
Maybe you
explain
can do that.
continuity
Just
again.
go one slide back. That's
Yeah,
it.
I'll explain continuity again. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, so what happens in continuity is that, let's say, whatever information is on the screen. So let's say we take an example of drop down. A website is there, and we go on the header section, and we hover over some item, and there's a drop down. Now what will happen is, our eye will first scan the list of the drop down. So basically a vertical continuity is now established. The user will read all the content list. So this is what continuity talks about, and continuity can be vertical as well as horizontal. For example, in this section, what is happening is in the second wireframe. So here we have on the hero section we have three images, and like two images are half cut out of the screen. So what will happen is we'll see at the center, and then maybe we'll scroll left or right. So this is establishing a continuity, like we are going horizontal to explore the content. So this is kind of exploring the continuity horizontally. Then if we take a look at this list that we have, now what happens is when we are going through this list, we'll first scan this list. If we are looking for certain information, we'll scan this list, like if it is there or not, then we will move on to some other element, right? So this is what continuity is, basically scanning the information vertically or horizontally. Right. Now, law of closure. So, in law of closure, a group of elements are often perceived to be single recognizable form or figure. The closure also occurs when object is incomplete or part of it is are not enclosed. So, uh, the best example for this would be might have seen some logos or some illustrations where all the information is not conveyed. In the illustration, some part of the visual is missing, but our mind still understands or is still able to figure out what that particular illustration or that visual is trying to convey. So I've taken the example of few icons. So in icons, in magnifying glass, if we see it differently, like there is a circle, then there is a inside curve, then we have a handle. So together we are able to understand like this is a magnifying glass, right? So based on the past experience we have, so we are easily able to figure out, our mind is easily able to connect the dot and understand like this is a magnifying glass. Or in these logos, like USA network is written here. So but S is invisible, there is no background for the S, but still our mind is able to figure out that S is in the center, it is written USA. How is it able to figure out, like through past experience we are able, our mind is able to connect the dots and understand whatever information is being portrayed to us. Then same with the NBC logo, we have petals, but in the center we have a cutout, triangle cutout. So our mind is able to understand like this, a peacock, a metaphorical representation of peacock is there. So this is what law of closure states. That is all. Thank you so much.